Hi, for our next instalment, I'm here with Chris from Ayres Punchard, the B Corp you've probably never heard of unless you play for Ventnor rugby team. Uh, Chris, you've been involved with SRI investing for 30 years, I think, before it was cool and before a lot of current movements. It's great to have you as a veteran. Could you just tell us a bit more about Ayres Punchard and your 30 years history, really?
The story, yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Rob. It's nice to see you. So, Ayres Punchard was founded in 1995. I did 3 years with the life insurance industry before that as a financial advisor, in the bad old days, and hated the idea of the commission-only sort of sales drive type process that they employed. There were some good things amongst the companies I worked for. They weren't really unethical. I think they had a good sort of idea, but it was badly translated in terms of the culture of the time. But what was interesting at that time was the life insurance industry was being bought by the tobacco industry, and we had a number of acquisitions: Ally Dunbar, Eagle Star. Good examples. British American Tobacco bought those companies, formed British American Financial Services, and I didn't work for them, but at the time, sadly, my mother was dying of lung cancer, and I had already lost my father probably to smoking, brain hemorrhage. So it was pretty raw for me, and I could see what was happening. And I was selling life insurance, so I thought, oh, this is a good idea. I'll do some research. And I looked at the rate books. In those days, we had rate books. That's how you calculated your premiums. And behind me on the shelf at the bottom there, you can see some Economist, I think. But underneath those, there's lots of old money management magazines going back to the early 1990s. And in the back of those magazines were the rates for all the different life insurance companies. So we took the rates, the averages. We looked at what was being charged for non-smokers and smokers, and discovered that the tobacco-owned companies were charging more for smokers than anybody else, which kind of said something about the message they were putting out in their marketing about cigarettes, that there actually was a problem, but they weren't admitting to it. And we know that now, of course we do. But back then, it was still the case that the tobacco companies were claiming that the tobacco didn't do anybody any harm. So we had the classic greenwash, didn't we? But we didn't know about that then. But that's what we uncovered in the research. And when my mother died eventually and left us money enough for me to take a year out so that I could learn how to be a proper financial advisor, that was what we founded the company on. And that was that. Hypocrisy is what we called it then. It still is, isn't it? But hypocrisy was something clients didn't like. And when we told them about it, they were shocked. They actually were shocked. And it's funny because it's what we were talking about just now in terms of this problem that we've got, that people are shocked, and when you tell them what companies really get up to, they're quite surprised. Well, more, they're shocked. So it's that we're really focused on. And we've never, in the past, we didn't ever ram this down anybody's throat. I mean, we had tobacco in the portfolios, we had oil, mining, all sorts of things in the portfolios, which, in a way, we kind of felt the same as clients. What can you do about it? It's very difficult to see what you can do. We had SRI funds, so socially responsible investment funds. There weren't very many back then. You had MPI Global Care and Friends Providence Stewardship, which still exist in a different format, but that was about it. So it was only in 2009 that I started to realise that there was actually something that was showing a financial outperformance in terms of the long-term way that these funds could perform and outperform conventional funds. And the CFA, who I became a member of when I got my IMC, my investment management certificate, and I'm still a member. They produced some interesting research which suggested that either a combined approach or a more socially responsible approach could yield benefits, and they started to call it sustainability. And I mean, at that time ESG had already been coined, but it wasn't really very well known about. So we got to that point where we were starting to say to people, do you know what, it might be a good idea to start taking this a bit more seriously in a financial context, rather than just being an ethical preference, if you like. But it was very much about ethics in those days, so we did call it ethical investing at that point. And this kind of culminated in, I don't quite know how I got to meet Lawrence Gosling, but Lawrence Gosling was I believe he was the managing editor of Investment Week and that sort of those incisive media publications. And he said to me one day, would you like to be a keynote speaker at our Sustainable Investment Awards conference? And it's to fund managers. And I'm sure you could come up with something great to say in your keynote. So I said, well, yeah, thank you very much. I didn't really know what a keynote was, so that's interesting. We'll do that. He said, you need probably 20 minutes, 25 minutes of content, so off you go. And so off I went, and I created a presentation that basically got no round of applause from the audience. There was a lot of stunned faces. And what I'd done basically was I had told them that they weren't really telling the truth. That what their ethical funds said on the badge was not what was in the tin. And I gave them lots of examples and showed them lots of pictures of what these companies were doing, including the burning down of huts in the middle of the jungle where people used to live. And I think I hit to the heart of the problem with them, and they didn't like it very much. So Lawrence came over to me at the end and shook my hand and said, that went well. You didn't get a round of applause. And I said, didn't I? Because I was so nervous I didn't even realise what had happened. But it was a big moment, and we've put the whole thing on our website, so you can go and look at it if you're interested. It's a long way back in the news section, right at the beginning. But the reality is that the fund management industry was greenwashing and telling people that they could invest ethically, when in fact that was not really true. So from that point onwards, we started to think very hard about how we scrutinize those funds that we use in the portfolio. We can't change much because we think that it's a massive job to change. I mean, it's a very slow job. Somebody said that change can take generations and that many people will never see the fruits of their labor, which I think is fair. It may take a long time, but we're having some effect. We put in place a research project, which we now call Antithesis Research, which is effectively, we basically use it to triage our portfolio. There's about 850 companies in the portfolio, and at this time anyway, and we use data scraping and all sorts of techniques to work out exactly what we've got there and to work out where the biggest problems are. And then we'll focus our attention on those companies, because we can't do all 850. It's just not possible. But the reports that we now produce these days are massively improved on what we used to produce. So these reports are for engagement purposes. We take them back to fund managers. We sit down with them, go through it, try and work out what's material to them. Hopefully we'll find things which they are willing to go out and do the engagement on. Very often they're already doing the engagement, but they haven't quite got the level of evidence that we provided. And sometimes they're just not on topic, so they might not be engaging with the things that we would like them to engage with. And the way that we choose those things are determined by transgressions of the United Nations Global Compact. So, as I say, we come on a long way from the days when I used to be going to a fund manager meeting and I get a text on my phone from one of my children who was doing the research saying, "Dad, could you ask them about this person that died during this operation or this placing of an oil rig or something like that, or ask them about their supply chain." And you go to the fund manager and they'd say, "Sorry, what do you mean supply chain?"
Yeah.
So, it's interesting. So the reports we do now, they can be 30 pages long, and the full engagement could be 100 pages of A4 in the end. There's a lot of toing and froing, particularly if we're asking for a divestment. And those can take a long time, maybe 12 months or longer. And sometimes we almost never get any credit for that, because not that we're really looking for credit, but it's nice to know, to be able to attribute what you've done to an action. But it's very difficult because fund managers have their own processes. They're doing their thing, and the last thing they want to say or let anybody know is that they were influenced by an outside body that they didn't employ and they haven't paid. So, that's too much.
Yeah. But I suppose when people are demanding more shareholder activism on a positive sustainability agenda, to have a helping hand like you going in and informing the conversation, even though it's quietly and perhaps unpaid and in the background, it's an extremely positive force for good, I think, just to show the way forward, even if every fund manager insists on their own processes.
Yeah, there's a lot of I was going to say, I'm not quite sure how to express it really, but there's resistance because you've employed a sustainability team, and you've got fund managers that come up with an idea, and they have their thesis, and they refer the proposed holding back to their sustainability team, and these guys come up with an argument maybe to support the fund manager, and then it goes to perhaps a committee, and there's some maybe non-execs on the committee or advisors, and I don't know what happens then, but they've gone through all that process and they've done all those things, and they've paid quite a lot of money for the salaries of those people, and there's a lot of investment into that idea, and then we come along and tell them that it's rubbish, and they don't like it. Why would
Do
they
you put
like
a bow on it?
Yeah, probably should. Yeah, but I don't want to make it sound too. It's not meant to be aggressive. It is actually meant to be helpful, and we are trying to be helpful. But I think quite often it's not seen like that necessarily. And we've been accused of virtue signaling, literally, to our faces, and we're thinking, well, hang on a minute, you're getting the wrong end of the stick here, and that's not what we're doing actually. And we're trying to be really objective too. So we're taking the 10 principles of the United Nations Global Compact, which is an agreement that's been, I'd say signed, but it's been, well, people do join up to it. So these companies are often signed up to it, and these are internationally recognised standards. So it's not some small thing, and the fund managers themselves are saying that that's what their principles of responsible investment are based on, those things. So we ought to be able to have some agreement over those standards being met. And if they're not, then that's a point of engagement. Surely that's a point of engagement. So, or possibly a point of divestment if that engagement fails. And that's what clients would expect. Otherwise, they do see it as hypocritical, and they do see it as mislabeled. And frankly, the FCA in the SDR also see it that way. And we've been doing this for quite a long time now, so we're quite good at it. And I think we're doing that as we take a cut, if you like, from our portfolio in order to do that work, and our clients agree to that. And our clients, I think, mostly like what we're doing. The ones that we talk to in detail about this stuff certainly do. Others, I think, look at it and think, well, it's a way of researching, it's a way of making this work better. So whether they're ethically engaged with it or not, I don't know sometimes. Like I said to you originally, it's
Yep.
a little bit hard to judge sometimes, but we never sold it to be do-gooding or anything. We like the idea that there's some ethical robustness to it, but actually it's more about the fact that sustainable businesses have got a better long-term prospect.
That narrative is very much important if you're really trying to make a positive difference.
Yeah,
Chris, we're kind of running out of time now, but for people that want to get more involved with this and find out more about your work, is it just go to the website and start clicking? It sounds like there's lots of stories and plenty of history to your work, and is that the best way forward?
Cool, yeah, just drop me an email. One of the things we're looking at the moment is applying the research to endowment funds. So lots of the university endowments are committed to sustainable approach to investment. But we think that because that's often led by the fund management industry, there's sometimes a misalignment of value, or values, and that's where this work can really help. So we do it for ourselves, for our Key to the Future portfolio, and I think they would find it very interesting. So that's something that we're working on at the moment.
Yeah, sounds great. Well, thanks very much, Chris, for your time. Great to chat to you. Very interesting as always. And we'll take it back to the studio on that point. Thanks very much.
Okay, Rob, nice to see you. All the best.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.